Good morning, everyone. This is John Heerdink, and welcome to our Tribe Public CEO presentation titled Food Shouldn't Hurt, EOE, Eupraxia, and the Promising New Treatment Approach. This webinar will be co-hosted by James A. Helliwell, MD, CEO of Eupraxia Pharmaceuticals. It's a public company trading on the NASDAQ, symbol EPRX. In short, Eupraxia is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing locally delivered extended release products that have the potential to address therapeutic areas with high unmet medical need. The company strives to provide improved patient benefit and has developed technology designed to deliver targeted, long-lasting activity with fewer side effects. As many of you know, I am the managing member of Tribe Public. Our website is tribepublic.com, tribepublic.com. Members from 31 plus countries and 50 states have joined Tribe Public freely to gain direct corporate access to leaders and experts that they care about via our webinar events and via 41 venue sites located across the US, where we host in-person luncheons, dinners, and speaking engagements with local tribe members with these same experts. Tribe members are furthermore invited to submit names of industry experts and leaders via our free wish list process on our website, adding names of companies, subjects that span across all sectors so that they can learn more. We look forward to hearing from you. Please note that I'm also the managing director of Vista Partners, a registered investment advisory in California, and that website is vistapglobal.com. Please review both sets of disclaimers at each site. No, I'm currently a shareholder of Eupraxia and also an advisor. I would also like to thank you all for participating and for all of your submitted questions, and remind everyone that you may send in more questions via the Zoom chat feature during this event, which will be about approximately 30 minutes. A video of this event will also be published at our Tribe Public YouTube channel and be sent out to all post the event via the Tribe This Week, which is our simple weekly e-newsletter that goes out at the end of each week, continuing to inform and also encourage the wish list process of sending in the names of who you want to hear from. Thank you again also to Eupraxia to joining us today. And now let's get started with James telling us a little bit about himself and then going into his presentation. Thanks again for all attending.
Great. Thank you, John. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. And thank you to all of you who are joining us live, sort of in the dog days of summer. It's a great pleasure to be able to chat with you today. For those I haven't had the good fortune of meeting yet, my name is James Helliwell. I'm a physician by background, and I'm a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist. And doing that, my focus was in cardiac transplantation, sort of artificial heart work and critical care. And it was being involved with those patients where precision was everything, that it really sparked in me this need and desire to be able to help patients, not just in my operating room, but also out in the world by being able to deliver medicines that are more precise, more predictable, that makes them more efficacious, and makes them safer. And today we're going to be talking a bit about a disease that you may not have heard of. And the title "Food Shouldn't Hurt" is both a title and a warning. So as you see as we go through this, food really shouldn't hurt. And if it does, we're going to tell you maybe perhaps what may be going on, and also what we propose to be able to do about that. Um, the usual forward-looking statements I encourage you all to read, and these are also on our website. So first, let's tell you a little bit about our approach. And this is and it's interesting because what we do is aim for precision. So this is about giving you the medicine that you need in the place that you need it, in the dose that you need it, for the time that you need it, and not everywhere you don't need it. And that may seem like an obvious concept, but yet when we take almost any medicine today, it floods our entire body. You may take an Advil after a golf game or a tennis game for your elbow. That Advil is hitting everywhere in the body, not just your elbow. Well, our look at that is all the side effects are really coming from those off-target effects. And because you have to try and minimize those, it means that you may actually be underdosing for your on-target effects. And so we created a technology in-house to be able to deal with that called the DiffuSphere technology. Now, this took us years to develop. It's covered by five big patent families. Expiry is until the mid 2040s, so an incredible amount of coverage. And what we've actually done is very novel. We have the ability, and here we're going to be talking about the esophagus, the ability to actually deposit into the tissue itself of the esophagus these little diffuspheres. They're the size of a grain of sand, and they will release drug. In this case, a drug all of you may know, which is called fluticasone propionate or Flovent, Flonase. You've probably seen it sitting there hanging in the Target pharmacy. And so that drug has been around for a very long time. It's very well understood. And what we have done is repurpose it, be much more precise to be able to get much better results and much safer results. Now, 6 or 7 years ago, this was a way of sort of delivering medicines. It was quite out of favor. If you look today, there are quite a few companies that have taken older drugs and they're delivering them much better for very precise indications. One that I'll point you to is a company called Halozyme. Their delivery technology takes IV drugs and turns them into subcutaneous drugs. They're now a roughly $9 billion company. CG Oncology is looking at bladder cancer. Palvella is looking at a variety of skin conditions. These are multi-billion dollar companies that are generating an incredible amount of data and value for patients and for shareholders. And so, following along with that, we want to talk a little bit today about eosinophilic esophagitis. We call it EOE for short. What is this disease? Essentially, think of it a little bit like asthma, but in the esophagus. So, in other words, it is inflammation, and it is inflammation that results in scar tissue or fibrosis. Now, this has been really underdiagnosed. As little as 5 years ago, this was an orphan disease. So the idea was there were only 150,000 people in the United States with this. This is growing very, very rapidly. Why is it growing rapidly? Well, it turns out one of the biggest things is it was underdiagnosed and it requires biopsies. So gastroenterologists go down with a camera, take a look, and take biopsies. So let's come back to food shouldn't hurt. So many people with this have been misdiagnosed as reflux. If you have reflux, reflux should not be painful or difficult to swallow. And if you have those symptoms, the recommendations are to go and get a biopsy. When they biopsy people who have difficulty or pain on swallowing, as opposed to only biopsying something that looks bad, they diagnose EOE at 5 times the rate. So that really comes back to gastroenterologists really trying to tell both family doctors and their patients food should not be difficult to swallow and food shouldn't hurt. And because it does for these patients, it is devastating. Think about so much of what we do revolves around food. We socialize over food. We do business over food. We spend time with family over food. We sustain ourselves with it. If all of a sudden you can't eat and you can't be around people when you eat and you're throwing out, it is a devastating disease. And so as we look at that prevalence growing to close to 1 million patients, and really there are not a lot of therapies here. The drug we use, fluticasone propionate, has been used off-label very effectively in this disease. But the problem is delivering it. It is very, very difficult to actually get it into the esophagus, have it coat the esophagus, and stay there when they deliver it orally. So now we come to the way we're doing this. So patients, we already talked about these endoscopies that they go for. So the standard is to go for an annual endoscopy. And so once a year, these patients are showing up. They're going for an endoscopy. But today, all they're getting is pictures and biopsies. So little pieces of tissue taken to monitor the disease. What we're doing, and in our studies we are doing, is piggybacking on that procedure patients are already having. using the skill the gastroenterologists have and have down pat. They are very good at it because they do it with lots of other drugs, which is a submucosal injection. There are no nerve endings. Patients don't feel these. They don't feel the nerve ending. They don't have the nerve ending for this kind of pain. What we do is we deposit little bits of these drugs, the diffuse spheres, throughout the esophagus, giving broad coverage. So now you can see we've delivered the drug exactly where it belongs and not where it doesn't. So now let's talk a little bit about the data. So our trial is called the Resolve trial. And when we look at this, one of the big things before I dive into data is what does success look like? So we have a very important data readout coming in Q4 of this year, which is a very important interim analysis in our phase 2b randomized controlled trial. The data I'm showing you today is for our first phase 2 trial of phase 2a. The important things that exist here are durability. We anticipate this being a once a year treatment. So imagine today you've got a drug that you need to take orally twice a day, or perhaps you're on an injectable that is once a week. Here you're talking about once a year. So durability, really important. The other thing is we need to see symptom remissions that are basically just in line with what people are getting today. Because the problem today is not just that we need a better therapy, it's that we need one that patients are actually going to take. Compliance, meaning people actually taking the medicine as prescribed, is a huge issue in this disease because of the drugs and the way that they are delivered. And we also want to see tissue health get better. So what we've seen so far is first just the drug delivery itself. Now imagine we talked about Advil. You take an Advil, it says it lasts 6 to 8 hours. Well, you feel better in about an hour, and in about 4 hours or so, you're probably starting to feel something coming back. And so what that is basically the drug does a big peak and then drops off very rapidly, but it's not safe to take another dose yet. What you see here when we deliver our drug is that for 48 hours, there's an equilibration as these diffuse spheres settle into the tissue. From 48 hours to 1 year, that drug is delivering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at a steady state into that tissue. And what that means is that we're keeping safe concentrations. And we say that based on what you can see there with that red line. That is a concentration that people who take Advair, the same drug we're using, and if they're taking it daily for asthma, for COPD, that's the level that they have in their blood. And we know based on large studies that that's very, very safe. And so as you can see, we're well below that level. Now, despite the fact that we're not releasing in big spikes and we seem to be getting that very smooth delivery, that is resulting because of where we're delivering it, which is directly into the esophagus, actually very good results where patients are seeing a very good clinical response. So first off is clinical remission. Now, this is using the Straumann Dysphagia Index. So dysphagia is that difficulty swallowing. And so what we know is that really sort of the best therapy today for long-term use in their phase 2 study, they demonstrated they were getting about 40% of patients to clinical remission. Here, we achieved that within 2 weeks. We get to about 55, 60% by 8 weeks. And at 6 months, 80% of patients are in clinical remission. And then holding that all the way out to a year where they're at about 70%. So this means the patients who were having great difficulty swallowing are now in a place where they're considered in clinical remission, meaning that their life is really not impacted at all by the difficulty swallowing that this disease has. Now, we talked about not hurting. Odinophagia, that's pain on swallowing. Here, what you can see is that roughly at the beginning, 60% of patients have moderate to severe pain on swallowing. Well, within 12 weeks, we have 75% of patients who essentially are pain-free. They are living a very normal life without pain, and we maintain that all the way out to 52 weeks. So again, what you're seeing here is the benefit of this hyperlocalized response. and we're seeing it clinically, meaning how patients are feeling. Well, in addition to that, we're also seeing the changes happening on biopsies. So this is tissue health. So this is looking at both inflammation and scar tissue by taking little chunks of tissue from throughout the esophagus. Now we take between 16 and 20 biopsies. So we get a very clear picture of what's happening inside the esophagi of these patients. The standard therapies today will do about as well as that red bar that you see there, which is our 4 milligram dose. And again, what is success? We just need to be as good as the therapies that are today, but be lasting about a year. But here, as you can see, as we go up in dose, we're actually seeing a much stronger response. And that response that we're getting there is really seeing a very strong reversal, not just of inflammation, but also, and we published this data fairly recently, also seeing a reversal in the fibrosis itself, meaning that what these patients are experiencing is not just an improvement in symptoms, but actually a reversal of the tissue effects of the disease as well. And again, long lasting. Here we only take tissue to 9 months, but you can see at 9 months that effect is sustained, just as the clinical effect was sustained all the way out to 1 year. And here, also doing that on a background of safety. One of the things with this class of drug when taken orally is you'll see rates of 25% of patients getting a fungal infection in the mouth to sometimes even higher than that in some studies. We've had 0 patients with oropharyngeal candidiasis in this first study. And again, long-term safety. So no procedural problems, meaning from the injections themselves. There's been no issues associated with that in patients, nor with the drug itself that we have seen. And so a very, very safe delivery that we've seen in the data so far, and doing that profile over all the way out to a year. Now we have data coming more this year. We will in September be having the last part of the data from that dose escalation trial. And in addition to that, in Q4, as mentioned, is that key data point, that interim data from our phase 2b. After that interim data release in December, we anticipate going to the FDA in the first part of 2027 so that we can actually be beginning our phase 3 trial in the middle part of 2027 to be able to look to a launch in 2029 or 2030. So very much on the path here to hopefully providing great options for patients. A quick review of our cap table, and then we'll dive into question and answers here. So as you can see, we have a very sort of tightly held stock, also lots of insider ownership, both on an issued and outstanding and fully diluted basis. So strongly supported with direct investment, both from management, such as myself, as well as directors. And as you can see, cash and short-term investments is close to $134 million as of our last quarterlies on June 30th. And that takes us through to Q3 of 2028. So the opportunity to provide lots of data and meaningful updates without any need for cash in the early time period that's coming up. And so with that, maybe I will pause here and give time for some questions. And John, perhaps there's some questions people may have in the audience. And thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to run through that.
Well, thanks again, James. Appreciate it. As I've seen you evolve over the last couple of years after being introduced and started investing in you and taking you out to meet some of the tribe members throughout the U.S. It's been exciting to see this evolution. One obviously in the clinic that you're showing, and you've continued to meet or exceed expectations along the way. It's hard to say, and when you're dealing with science, and it's always hard to say when you're just dealing in general in life, and you've been doing both, and you've evolved, and I think that's why you've attracted the also the capital that you've been able to come in, especially over the last year, where you've had some of the big, brightest, and smartest and biggest funds in the land have now invested in you as of the last two financings that have given you the money through the end of 28. So I'm excited about this next chapter, where we're going. By the way, folks, just to let you know, we will be in Nashville for an event on October 13th. That's Tuesday, October 13th, a dinner event. So if you and/or friends that are part of the tribe or would like to be part of the tribe would be interested in meeting James in person at a dinner event, we for the tribe, let me know. And I'm happy to see if we can fit you in there. We've got a really good group of tribe members there already that are very interested in meeting James and learning more about Eupraxia. And if you're not going to be around Nashville, let us know and continue to express where you want to maybe have James come out to meet him in your tribe city. And maybe we can host an event there and marry with his very busy schedule these days. As again, the institutions are demanding more and more of his time as he's evolved this, and now in close to around 500 million market cap, beginning to really draw some attention. As that's not huge, but it's also at a more significant stage and has funded through some very significant milestones that he has on the horizon. Quick questions. Again, a reminder that you can send in any questions if you want through the Zoom chat feature, but we've got some good questions already here. In no certain order, let's start with this. Why has EOE gone from an orphan disease to nearly up to a million patients in 5 years?
Yeah, and it's absolutely fascinating to see that growth. And there are two elements. There is some disease growth itself. There's something in the environment that seems to be bringing out this sort of inflammatory reaction. But a huge portion of this is just simply recognizing the disease. There's an article in the New York Times called "The Mystery of My Burning Esophagus." And if people look that up, it is this harrowing 10-year journey of this patient who keeps going from doctor to doctor trying to figure out why they're having such difficulty swallowing. And the answer was EOE. And so now, though, what's happened is physicians, so not just the subspecialist esophageal gastroenterologists, but all gastroenterologists and filtering down to family doctors are really learning about this condition and looking for it. And so when you go looking for it, you'll find it more. And that's great for patients, but it also creates a huge increased need for treatment. If you look back 25 years to Crohn's disease, this was the same with Crohn's disease. People were having these symptoms, and not everybody knew what it was. And that went from being an orphan disease to a million plus patients as well. So this is really sort of that next Crohn's disease.
Interesting. And you've touched on this, but with this rise in patients, can you has the those that are treating it changed at all or expanded?
Yeah, it has. So it's really gone from you used to refer, even if you were a gastroenterologist, you would say, I'm going to refer my EOE patient to that esophageal specialist. And that's all they would really see is I just see EOE patients or other esophageal diseases. And now, because the numbers are swelling so much, these are starting to become part of everybody's practice as a gastroenterologist. Now, for us, that becomes really interesting because our therapy, and we walked through its impact on patients, but it actually has a very positive impact for the physician as well. This aligns entirely with their practice. So there's a real desire from the community gastroenterologists who treat EOE patients to really actually keep them, treat them. And they seem to be very excited about our data and about how our product is delivered and how it fits within their practice. And so that overall expansion into sort of all gastroenterologists has been very interesting and will continue to lead to growth in diagnosis.
Okay, and related to that, so the question is along the lines of for those of us that are not doctors, is an injection or an endoscopy sounds a little daunting. Could you explain why this is actually not challenging?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, all of us, when we think about the idea of sort of having a scope, sort of put down for someone to take pictures, with something the size of a garden hose, it just doesn't sound pleasant. And nobody's going to argue it's pleasant. But it's actually if you have this disease and you have an esophageal problem, this procedure becomes routine for you. So first, you're going for it probably several times before you've even been diagnosed. You get sedated, so you're asleep while this is happening. And it happens very quickly. And most patients, once they have EOE, they say, this is absolutely not a big deal for me. They don't mind it. Even the pediatric patients, the youth patients, they go in, they go to sleep, they wake up, and it's done. And so when you think about our therapy being delivered during that procedure, the patient's already there. They don't realize they're even getting our procedure other than the fact that they were told they're going to get given a therapy. So you're taking what is now just a screening procedure, so something that they do but doesn't make them feel better, and you're turning it into both monitoring and screening as well as therapy. And that's really important. It's really convenient for patients, convenient for the physicians, and really not daunting at all.
Okay. Thank you. And then this is related. So in precision medicine, the commercial value often comes from delivering the right treatment, the right patient at the right time. How are you thinking about the diagnostic, procedural, and physician workflow requirements needed to make Eupraxia's approach scalable in the real world practice?
Yeah, so the real world is really interesting and it's such a good question. So there's a lot of questions about the procedure, the reimbursement, the fee codes. How does this actually work? First, I will point people to our website, eupraxiapharma.com. There's actually a webinar on there where we have both one of the investigators from the trial as well as a gastroenterologist who's an expert really in reimbursement and all the rest of that. So first off is to recognize that for gastroenterologists, um, really their business is interventions. So they see people in the office. That's not their profit center. Their profit center is doing endoscopy. And they're inherently proceduralists. And so they like to go in and fix patients and do procedures. They do that via endoscopy. So there are a whole host of existing CPT codes or procedural codes. And really interestingly, if they go in for their annual endoscopy, that's really considered a screening procedure. So they're going in, they're taking pictures and biopsies to monitor the disease. So the doctor will get to bill for that. Now, if they use our drug, they are now doing a therapeutic procedure. There is an existing fee code for that. It has a facility fee and a doctor fee. Because they're doing the same thing, but for two reasons, the medical system understands that. And so you bill both with a modifier that says, I'm here for two reasons, and I'm being efficient by being here for two reasons. And so you bill this modifier. So now in your one procedure, you're doing two things and you're getting two billings. In addition to that, our drug will be what's called buy and bill, meaning that the physician actually brings it into their clinic. And then what they do is they use it and then they bill back the cost of the drug as well as they get an administrative fee. We often call this the ASP plus 6. So that's basically the average price of buying it plus 6%. That's their handling fee. Now, in private insurers, that's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurers will often pay 10, 15, 20%. Now, if you're talking about a drug where today existing therapy, the wholesale acquisition cost of the sort of the long-term therapy today is $109,000 a year for a weekly injection. So when we talk to payers, and you'll see this in detail in our webinar, they're really talking about prices in the $50,000 price point is really putting you at the front of that list. So if you're a physician and you get a 6% fee on 50,000, that's $3,000. So all of a sudden now you've got the fee codes for the procedures, you've got this other fee, and all of that is when you're delivering ideally better care for your patient. And then in addition to that, you're really helping your practice, and all for what's taking an extra 5 to 10 minutes to do.
Sounds like a relatively economic, smart move to move. Hopefully, we'll get it there sooner than later, right? So,
Exactly. And, I mean, some of us may know the ophthalmology story. When you look at ophthalmologists and how retinal and for the retinal specialists doing injections started to change the economics of their practice. Um, Very, very similar. So it's the incentives for what we hope is the best patient care align with what's also good for the physician.
Interesting. Speaking of sort of the future, can you what should we be expecting this fall in it and for the interim data readout in Q4? What does a win look like for investors there?
Yeah. So as we look at that, really, as we walk through that data, what's a win? A win is looking like the therapies that are available today, but being able to take it once a year by the doctor through exactly the way that we just described. That's really what we hear from patients, from doctors, and from payers is a win. And as you saw from our data, we were really above that bar. So it gives us room where we could come back a long way from our initial data and still hit that win. Now, all of our assumptions are based on that minimum bar. Anything you do better than that changes how you might access the market, the speed with which you get uptake, the pricing that you get to charge. And obviously, we hope to be able to deliver the best possible therapy we can to patients. We're really excited about that data in December, and that'll be in the first part of December. Prior to that, though, we're going to have continuing data through the fall that will be coming from our phase 2A trial, as well as we're going to have some information coming about the phase 2B trial before that interim efficacy data, where we're going to be really helping people set up for that data, talking about the baseline characteristics of the patients that are in that trial, comparing them to our first trial, so people can really level set as we go into that important data event.
Got it. This came from this week's news. It says Moderna and Merck have shown the value of pairing a precision intervention with an established standard of care. Where do you see the strongest potential for Eupraxia's product candidates to complement, not merely replace current treatment paradigms?
Yeah, it is. So that's a really great question. The way and very insightful as to clearly how broadly the diffuse sphere can be used. So we can use it with lots of different drugs in lots of different areas. And as we look at that, we really do believe that in some cases we may well become a monotherapy and the best therapy. But in a great many places, we are going to be part of multimodal therapy by being able to deliver with great precision and great consistency, allowing perhaps for other drugs to come down in dose to be able to be ideal. We can think of that obviously in gastrointestinal diseases, but also in other places. Oncology is a great example. Multimodal therapy is almost always the answer in oncology. You can imagine with our ability to be very precise, we are busy exploring and working with a variety of different oncology agents where we'd have the ability then to be able to get directly into a tumor and really eat the tumor from the inside, as opposed to delivering a drug everywhere in the body and really hoping that it gets to the tumor in the right concentration. And again, we wouldn't necessarily imagine that as monotherapy, but combined with other therapies where those can be modulated in their dose and their delivery to be able to minimize side effects and maximize efficacy.
That makes sense. Sort of related to that, so which attributes make a drug or a disease area particularly well suited for diffuse sphere?
Yeah. So when we look at the diffuse sphere, its real advantage is that it's hyperlocal. So we are targeting the esophagus, it is in the esophagus. If we want to put something inside a tumor, it is inside that tumor. We put it in a joint, it stays in the joint. And so then what you want to think of is diseases where the therapy for that disease is best targeted to an area. And that is very often the case. Now, a truly systemic disease is probably not the ideal pairing for diffuse sphere and not what we're looking at the present time. So there are other people that have systemic delivery systems, but our focus is really in being able to get really directly into that tissue, not having systemic exposure, and really balancing that, hyper-focused, hyper-local drug delivery, and that's really where diffuse sphere excels.
Got it. Thank you. One last question. Is there any opportunity for accelerated track based on phase two data?
So absolutely. Depending on that data, when we have that out, there are opportunities for fast track, that breakthrough designation, and it really will be dependent on the data. But you can be rest assured, we really hope that we have the data that will support that, and if it does, we will be pursuing those very aggressively.
Got it. Thank you. Actually, one last thing, in regards to the investment analysts that are covering you now. Can you give us
Yeah.
sort of a cross stitch of that? Because it's expanded dramatically over the last year, 2 years, and I don't think a lot of people are seeing that research. And so, could you just kind of give us a understanding? Right now, the stock is trading in it's been sort of in a band, sort of, I would suggest in that sort of 670 to 750 range, and it popped up overnight to over $9 at one point, and significant money's come in here. What are the analysts saying from Wall Street today?
Yeah. So you're right. We have and have been really lucky to get just an incredible number of really high quality analysts. I believe we have 10 analysts covering us now from top Wall Street firms. And when we look at what they're saying, what they're really saying is that there's a huge need in EOE, that they believe that fluticasone is known to work in this disease. We're delivering it in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so they're really anticipating both the continued data through the fall as well as the data in December as interim data for that phase 2B. And their price targets range from a low of $14 to a high of $25. And I believe the median in there is $20 as a target price. So very enthusiastic support from the street, and I would argue that that also comes from the investor base as well. The June 30th filings for the 13F just came out for those who like to look up 13Fs and see. If you look at our shareholders, you will see that not just from financings, but also buying in the market, there have been some very strong positions taken by people who really are, the long only and the very smart biotech investors. And so we've been very pleased to be adding to our institutional shareholder base, and look forward to delivering for all investors and for patients.
Curious, I gotta ask this. Some of those names, can you share? Because it's in 13F, it's a public thing. Who showing up on your roster these days at ownership?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's lots that are in there. Ones that were not in prior to this. One that's on there is Janus Healthcare. And you can see based on the 13F filing, they established a fairly large position fairly quickly, not associated with the financing. And so you'll notice others like that. But again, these are folks who take their time, know what they're doing, have done their diligence, and are long-term players. And so we're thrilled to have these people doing the work, coming to the conclusions they're coming to, and joining us on our journey.
Well, thanks, James. Thanks for taking the time today. I know you've got meetings coming up here, and I want to conclude this today by just thanking you for continuing to do what you do, and at the same time joining us today and sharing your insights with the tribe. Want to remind all that we well, after this, I'll try to get this event video up. So if any of your friends that might want it to hear from James, I'll have this event video up at the Tribe Public YouTube channel. And today, because you joined it, I'll include you on our Tribe This Week newsletter, which will have a link to that when we get it out this afternoon after the close. Any additional questions that didn't get answered today, please pass them on to me, and or your wish to have James come back on another tribe event, webinar, and or in person through our wish list process. Just send that in, or ping me at john@tribepublic.com, and I'll do my best to try to work with James in his schedule to see if we can make that happen. We do know we'll be in Nashville on October 13th with James, 6 p.m. dinner event, and look forward to seeing some of you there and maybe some of your friends that have moved to Nashville, which seems to be happening a lot for us folks in California. But uh, again, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. And thank you, James, and we'll continue to follow and excited to see where you're taking this company.
Great. Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time today.
All
Take
the
care.